We tried to see Northern Ireland's wild coast in one day, traveling from Belfast to the Dark Hedges, Giant's Causeway and Derry, before driving back to Belfast that same night. But one mistake at Carrick-a-Rede, sudden changes in the weather and an exhausting schedule made us question whether we would finish at all. As someone who has traveled to 63 countries, I'll show you the real Northern Ireland road trip itinerary, the complete cost for 2 people and the mistakes you should avoid before attempting this Causeway Coast road trip yourself. Our challenge began the night before with a 5.5-hour flight from Larnaca to Belfast. After landing, we paid €20 for the airport transfer to the city centre, checked into the Leonardo Hotel and paid €353 for 3 nights, which worked out at €117 per night for 2 people. The next morning, we collected our rental car from Economy Rentals for €140 and began adjusting to driving on the left-hand side. Belfast quickly gave way to green countryside, narrow roads and tree-lined lanes. The sky was overcast, but the real question was not whether the weather would hold. It was whether we could complete this entire Northern Ireland itinerary before daylight, energy or patience ran out. After approximately 1 hour of driving, we reached the Dark Hedges, our first stop on the Causeway Coastal Route. Parking cost €6 and the main attraction was only a few minutes away on foot. The Dark Hedges became famous as the King's Road in the Game of Thrones locations. But seeing it in person felt more meaningful than simply visiting a filming location. The branches formed a dark natural tunnel that felt almost unreal, and after the night flight and the drive from Belfast, this was the first moment when I stopped thinking about the schedule. The trees were planted by the Stuart family in the 18th century, and many are now approximately 250 years old. Some are reaching the end of their natural lifespan, so future travelers may experience a very different landscape. We could not stay long though. This was a beautiful beginning, but 6 major stops were still waiting for us. 17 minutes later, we arrived at the Carrick-a-Rede Rope Bridge. Parking was free for ticket holders, and we paid €37 for 2 people because of a special promotion. The normal price was €22 per person. If you are planning a busy Northern Ireland travel guide, book online and choose a time slot in advance because a queue here could affect the entire day. The walk to the bridge took around 17 to 18 minutes, passing dramatic cliffs, unusual rock formations, and a small beach surrounded by rocks. The bridge hangs approximately 30 meters above the water and stretches 20 meters across to a small island with spectacular Atlantic views. But this became the most personal moment of the day. Despite traveling to 63 countries, I could not overcome my fear of heights. My arms and knees were shaking, so I decided not to cross. I was disappointed, but I found a higher viewpoint where I could still photograph the bridge and coastline. On the road afterwards, we also saw several dead foxes, hedgehogs and badgers, an upsetting reminder that the reality of a rural road trip is not always beautiful. 12 minutes later, we stopped at Dunseverick Castle, where parking was free, and we stayed for approximately 10 minutes before continuing towards Giant's Causeway. Only 5 minutes after Dunseverick Castle, we arrived at Giant's Causeway, the place I had been waiting for most. Before entering, we stopped at the Nook for fish and chips and drinks, paying €55 for 2 people. We then bought our Giant's Causeway tickets at the visitor center for €37, including parking. Because we were under pressure, we paid €4 for the return bus journey instead of walking the approximately 20 minutes to the basalt columns. It saved time, but it also showed that the cheapest option is not always the best option when you are attempting Northern Ireland in one day. Giant's Causeway contains more than 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, created approximately 60 million years ago when volcanic lava cooled and cracked. The first view was genuinely surreal. With the waves touching the shore, the green hill behind us, and the geometric rocks stretching across the coast, it felt as if we had landed on another planet. But here is the reality check. It was not an empty, peaceful coastline like the photographs suggest. There were hundreds of people, everyone wanted the same iconic images, and the wet rocks required careful steps. Giant's Causeway is absolutely worth visiting, but you should expect crowds, walking, transport decisions and safety concerns, as well as spectacular scenery. After leaving Giant's Causeway, we continued through Bushmills and reached Dunluce Castle approximately 10 minutes later. Parking was free, and we left the car along the road with other visitors. By then, rain had started and fog was descending over the Atlantic coastline. Normally, those conditions would make filming more difficult, but at Dunluce Castle they created some of the most dramatic images of the entire day. The ruins sit directly on the edge of the cliffs, and local stories connect the castle with a kitchen that reportedly collapsed into the sea in 1639. I also made one of my clearest mistakes here. I attempted to use my drone from behind the castle, even though drone flights are prohibited in National Trust areas. As the rain and wind became stronger, I stopped the flight because I did not want to lose the drone or create a safety problem. The perfect cinematic shot is never worth ignoring local rules or risking your equipment. Within minutes, the Causeway Coastal Route had changed completely, and the weather was becoming one of the biggest factors in our schedule. After Dunluce Castle, we drove for approximately 30 minutes through increasingly heavy rain before reaching Downhill Beach. Parking was free and we bought takeaway coffees for €9. After the cliffs, crowds, and constant movement of the morning, the 11-kilometer beach immediately felt more spacious and relaxed. Mussenden Temple stood dramatically above the coastline, surrounded by golden sand and dunes. We had been rushing from one location to the next, so this was the first time we stopped without immediately thinking about our next departure. The question was whether Downhill Beach and Mussenden Temple were worth adding to such a demanding Causeway Coast road trip. For me, the answer was yes. Not because they were the busiest attractions, but because they gave us the quietest and most memorable pause of the day. From Downhill Beach, we drove for approximately 48 minutes through rivers, forests, and green countryside before reaching Derry, Northern Ireland, also known as Londonderry. Parking cost €2, and our first impression was surprisingly positive. The city felt clean, organized, and full of life around the riverfront. We began at the Peace Bridge, which connects two communities after years of conflict, then walked towards the Guildhall and through Shipquay Gate into the historic walled city. Instead of treating Derry as a quick final stop, we explored the 17th century city walls, Shipquay Street, the Diamond and its war memorial, before continuing to Craft Village with its small houses, cafes and craft shops. Street art, local life and the Presbyterian Church made the city feel much more layered than a sightseeing checklist. For anyone planning Derry, Northern Ireland or Londonderry travel, my advice is to walk slowly and allow time for the city to reveal itself. We finished with a Chinese takeaway in the car for €22 and bought drinks from a market for another €2.50. It was simple, practical, and exactly what we needed after such a demanding day. After dinner, we began the 1.5-hour drive back to Belfast. We stopped once for coffee and sweet snacks, spending €10 and bought €32 of fuel before returning the rental car. By then, the lack of sleep from the previous night had completely caught up with us. We had followed the Causeway Coastal Route, visited every planned coastal stop, explored Derry, and still had to finish the journey back to Belfast. We had completed the challenge, but the final drive answered the question we had been asking all day. Yes, this itinerary is possible, but it is not relaxed. Back at the hotel, we spent another €6 on 2 coffees before finally ending the day. Using the rounded one-night hotel allocation of €117, our total spending came to €499.50 for 2 people, or €249.75 per person. This included the €20 airport transfer, 1 hotel night, the 140 euros rental car, 32 euros of fuel, parking, attraction tickets, the Giant's Causeway bus, meals, coffees and drinks. The core fixed costs, excluding food, drinks and coffees, came to 395 euros for 2 people, or 197 euros and 50 cents per person. Excluding the airport transfer as well, that figure was 375 euros. The easiest savings would be replacing the 55 euros meal at the Nook with supermarket food and walking to Giant's Causeway instead of taking the 4 euros bus. For a Northern Ireland in one-day experience, approximately 500 euros for 2 people is a realistic budget. If I repeated this UK road trip, I would not attempt such a demanding itinerary immediately after a 5.5-hour night flight and very little sleep. I would book Carrick-a-Rede Rope Bridge in advance, check drone restrictions before arriving at Dunluce Castle, allow more flexibility for weather and crowds, and divide the route across 2 days if photography and long walks were priorities. Some problems were outside our control. The fog and rain became heavier, the wind made filming dangerous, Giant's Causeway was crowded, and the delayed bus or sold-out time slot could easily have ruined the schedule. One day is possible, but only if you treat it as a challenge rather than a slow holiday. So, is Northern Ireland's wild coast worth visiting? Absolutely, but I would not recommend completing this exact route in one day unless you are treating it as a challenge. The Dark Hedges, Carrick-a-Rede Rope Bridge, Dunseverick Castle, Giant's Causeway, Dunluce Castle, Downhill Beach, Mussenden Temple and Derry each offers something completely different. But 2 days would give you more time for walking, photography and unexpected weather. If you are planning Belfast travel, a Northern Ireland travel guide, a UK road trip or a wider Ireland travel itinerary, this route can be unforgettable when you plan realistically. This is only the beginning of the UK and Ireland road trip series, with more real costs, mistakes and travel experiences coming soon. Useful hotel, transport and activity reservation links are available in the description. Don't forget to like, comment and share this travel vlog and subscribe to the channel. I'll be waiting for your questions about Northern Ireland and the Causeway Coast road trip.